Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you. Well, it's September, and as they say, time flies. Yeah, the light is changing. It's Labor Day weekend is coming. That means the end of summer. Yes, time marches on, which is a wonderful way to start this class. We talked in the last class about emotional time travel, and I mentioned today we're going to talk about physical time travel. And you may wonder what that has to do with mindfulness. Well, it's actually quite related, and you'll find out as we dive in. But I read a book by a quantum physicist named Carlo Rovelli last fall. It's called The Order of Time. And that's actually what influenced me to give these last 4 classes on time itself and our perception of it, so that we have a better understanding of how it impacts our lives. And he begins talking about this concept of physical time travel. And we know that no one has actually proven that it can happen in any meaningful way, but from a theoretical perspective, it's quite different. So obviously, I am not a physicist nor even a scientist. But I did want to share with you some of the fascinating work that Carlo Rovelli and his fellow scientists are doing, and to show you how it relates to mindfulness. So time travel has fascinated us since at least H.G. Wells's book, The Time Machine, written in 1895. And we have been fascinated by travel to the future with movies such as The Matrix or Star Wars, but we're also really interested in traveling back in time with cartoon shows like The Flintstones or my favorite movie, Groundhog Day, or even the television show from Britain that's been going since the 1960s called Doctor Who. So it really is something that we're fascinated by. And, to cut to the chase, as I say, they haven't proven that we can travel backwards and forwards in time, but Einstein did prove, as I mentioned in the last class, that time is relative and subjective depending on a number of factors such as age, emotion, position, movement, speed, attitude. So the idea was, since he proved this, he ended up defining something called Spacetime, which is a 4th dimension beyond depth, height, and width. And what this means is that my experience of time is different from yours. And as we've seen, depending whether you're standing still or moving, or if you're at sea level or on a mountain. And if you think about it, the Earth is a smaller circumference at sea level than on a mountain. So when it's spinning around on its axis, it's going to take less time. So even though it's imperceptible to us, they are able to measure that time moves more slowly at a higher altitude. Another example of this is, when we're flying, like I've flown to Australia numerous times, and when I leave on a Monday, I get there on a Wednesday because I'm going faster than the speed of the Earth. And when I come back, I actually come back into my past. So I leave on a Monday and I arrive on a Monday. But in effect, that's not really the same as moving back into your own past or into your own future. But the one thing to kind of keep in mind is that we talked about time being a measure of change, a measure of movement. And if you think about it, the Earth is actually moving in this fantastic cosmic ballet. It's always moving. So let me just read the statistics because I won't be able to do this correctly without it. But the Earth rotates on its axis at 16 miles per minute. But of course, we don't feel it. Then we rotate around the sun, obviously making the seasons, at a speed of nearly 20 miles per second. The sun is then bringing us along on its voyage through the Milky Way at a speed of 140 miles per second. The Milky Way is in turn flying through space at approximately 55 miles per second towards Andromeda. And the local group that contains our galaxy and Andromeda is falling at about 375 miles per second toward the Virgo cluster of galaxies, which is in turn moving towards a large complex of galaxies called the Great Attractor. And it's just amazing if you think about it, we're actually moving all the time in many different spheres, but it feels as if we're standing still. And that's what quantum physics is all about. So as Einstein said, a human being is part of a whole called the universe, just limited in time and space. And physicists know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. So that's where we're going to get into our perception of time zones and traveling between them. So back to Carlo Rovelli. So he is a leading researcher on quantum physics, specifically as it relates to time, space, and humanity. And if we consider, as we've said many times, that time is just a measure of change, then Carlo Rovelli says, and I'm going to say it very slowly because it's really amazing to think about this, the world is nothing but change. In fact, the world is a network of events that are constantly changing, not a network of immutable objects. So what does that really mean? So what he's saying is that things such as tables and chairs, houses, rocks, our bodies are really only events that for a while seem to be motionless or static. But he believes all life, all of the universe is and always has been about becoming, morphing into something else. So everything is changing just at different speeds and different durations. So a rock seems to be a rock for a very long time, right? A butterfly, not so much. But a rock will eventually be dust as a butterfly, and so will we. So the idea is we just don't perceive these changes going on because we have this limited time frame ourselves. And in the way that we don't perceive ourselves traveling at 16 miles per minute or 96 miles per hour on our axis, we might not perceive this idea of things morphing and changing and not being stable and static at all. So this incongruity is actually driving one of the greatest conundrums for scientists and philosophers alike, and may lead once and for all to the answer that time travel is possible. What everyone is trying to figure out is whether time exists only in the present moment, or does all time exist simultaneously? So we know our personal experience, and certainly what we focus on in mindfulness, is that we really only live in the present moment. There is nothing but this moment. And what Einstein has proven is that our perception of time doesn't actually align with the physics of the universe. So his mathematical theories have shown that all time exists. But if time exists only in the present, which is what we focus on in mindfulness, and rightfully so, we can't focus on what we really don't understand, then the past is really a memory and the future just a prediction. As we say all the time, you can't get a past breath back, you can't get in a future breath, right? And we don't want to get stuck in either of those time zones. We have to come into the present to be fully alive. So what the scientists call that is a concept called presentism. And in that understanding, in that context, time travel is not possible. But many, many scientists believe that that presentism is false and that all time exists simultaneously. And this is called eternalism. Remember, as Einstein said, physicists know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. So his theories have proven this. We just don't perceive it. The way we perceived the sun moving through the sky turned out to be us moving through the sky. Maybe we just don't have that knowledge. We don't have that perception yet. So under eternalism, time is a dimension, like height, width, and depth. And it's a 4-dimensional block that they call the block universe. And don't ask me to explain it any more than that. That's as far as I can go. But it is an understanding in which the past, present, and the future all exist simultaneously, side by side. And here, time travel is possible. We just haven't figured it out yet. So the purpose of sharing this concept is understanding and accepting that everything is constantly changing. So that's really the crux of it. Whether we believe in presentism or eternalism, the thing that is aligned with mindfulness is that everything changes. And it's just changing at different speeds and in different durations. And the idea with mindfulness is, can we flow with that change? Like the river we talked about last time, we are not a stagnant pond. We are a flowing river. We're all morphing into something else, whether it be an older version of ourselves or just dust. And in looking at ourselves as events, as this moment is morphing into the next, this aligns perfectly with the concept we spoke about in the last class with our episodic memory, that if we can withhold the judgment or that filter or that bias that locks into our construct understanding of whether something is good and bad, then it's much easier to change. It's much easier to flow and morph into this next moment, into this next existence. And so if we can withhold that judgment, we'll be able to make that flexibility and move much more easily. So I wanted to refer again to a poem I mentioned in one of the first classes, which is called The Guest House by Rumi. And he says, we may remember, this being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. And welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. And I think if we change the word guest to event, we can see that each event, even it seems sorrowful, can be clearing us out for some new delight. So COVID, that is just an event. And soon there will be no COVID. It will happen, we just don't know when. And there certainly may be something we can learn from the sorrow we're experiencing now, just as we can learn from all events. And in COVID, could it be that we're just learning how important real human relationships are, as we have to practice social distancing, as we have to hide our faces and our smiles? After my daughter has just arrived here and I haven't seen her in 8 months and I can't give her a hug for at least 2 weeks. But I'll tell you, when I give her that hug, I told her to watch out that I might have to break one of her ribs. It'll be such a big hug. So is there a way that this new experience of having to stay distant, of having to hide our faces, can be the lesson that we need to be more connected, more in person, more treasuring our loved ones? I mean, with all of our digital tools, which are helping us accommodate during these times, maybe they have helped us to become so disconnected from each other. And so this just might be the lesson from COVID, to increase that sense of connectedness and the necessity and the community that we can each, the support that we can provide each other through that connection. So all of this is just to say, all of these classes have been about the fact that our perception of time is so critical to our well-being. And I was hoping through these sessions to shed some light on the science of time, so that in having a better understanding of how it works, we can use time to our advantage and use the awareness of the present moment, its abundance, its possibilities, and not let our minds get stuck in any one time zones. But maybe like entrepreneurs, we have a vision of the future that we can make. And we can use our episodic memory to bring in all the time zones, embrace them all, live in an eternalist mind frame so that we don't have to get caught in any one time zone, and we don't have to be trapped by our filters and our biases. As Lisa Feldman Barrett says, our emotions are not hardwired. We can change our patterns. We can change our default settings and have that abundance, that sense of the abundance of the present moment and all the time zones, and bring them into this life. It's an amazing what possibilities we can imagine with that mindset. So just remember, how we live our days is how we live our lives. And as I always like to do, I'll leave you with this quote this one's from Bertrand Russell. He says, "Our feelings towards the past are so different from our feelings towards the future. The reason for this difference is wholly practical. Our wishes can affect the future, but not the past. The future is to some extent in our power, while the past is unalterably fixed. Whoever wishes to see the world truly, to rise in thought above the tyranny of practical desires, must learn to overcome the difference of attitude towards the past and future, and to survey the whole stream of time in one comprehensive vision." So thank you all. Just knowing that time is precious. We have this moment, and we can bring the past together with our sense of the future to live our most abundant, limitless lives with a sense of well-being and care and community for ourselves and those around us. So thank you so much.